Fragments of Silicon wants to know if you have done your civic duty.
All right, welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon. I'm your host Adam, and joining me as always is the regular crew. Um, right, so nothing really else to cover here at the top. So let's get to the news. Twilight, you start us off this week.
All right. It's been kind of cool here, obviously. There hasn't really been a whole lot going on around here in the past week. Uh, Besides, as I already stated last Friday, that holiday season sales have kicked in over here where I work. Um, Besides that, I played some in the game for review this Sunday, and that's about it.
All right. Alex.
Well, this week has been very frustrating because we've had a lot of work being done on the house. For Monday and Tuesday, we had electricians here rewiring some of our outlets and replacing some of our fans and stuff. And then today, we had our attic and parts of the basement insulated with better insulation, which is important because we're getting near the time of year when you're going to really need that. Thankfully, it hasn't been that cold yet. I didn't vote yesterday because I voted absentee like a week and a half ago. In video game news, it's a new month, so I started playing Splatoon 2 again, because they had a new update, and also because there's a new month, so a new gear in Salmon Run, and there's also a new stage in Salmon Run that I'm really enjoying. And I think that's about it for now.
All right, Petty Fang, you're up.
Well, Monday I went to see the doctor about my knee again. Basically, what's going to happen is first he's going to have me try, I think they were called nitroglycerin patches. I'm going to put like a fourth of one on my knee where the pain is and see if that helps. And then if
it doesn't, you'll get a plunger and detonate it.
Ha ha ha. That might be the last resort, but no, what if that doesn't help, what he's going to do is inject some sort of pain medication in there and also do some, I think he called it like some sort of needling procedure. Because the problem is it's been so long, the tendon that kind of holds the knee stable is been rubbing so much it's starting to develop scar tissue. So that needling procedure is to hopefully try and break some of that up. And if that all fails, then I'm going to need surgery. So that's fun.
Sounds like few steps along the way.
Mm-hmm.
So when do you start the patches?
We need to discuss it because insurance isn't going to cover it. So my sister and mom are going to see if they can, swing getting it, and then I'll just pay them back.
Right.
So possibly this weekend because the parents get paid on Friday. So we'll find.
Dumb that insurance doesn't cover that, but
it's because nitroglycerin patches are usually used for heart conditions. So because I'm not using it for their intended use, they're not going to cover it.
What about the medical shots?
The shots should be covered. I've had one before that they covered. I don't know about the needling thing though. That I'm going to need to look into if we come to that.
I mean, it's not surprising that insurance is going to stupidly not cover something, but it's still stupid.
Right.
Yeah. And like they usually cover that stuff if you're using it for the intended purpose, you know. And as far as other stuff, I'm looking to get a new CPAP provider because, oh boy, the adventure I had with my previous one. I ordered a mask over a month ago, and it finally came in last week. To say that was... Because, like, I waited 2 weeks for them to even tell me the original one I ordered was on back order, and then it's just poor communication and just I'm done with them, so I'm going to go somewhere else. But the thing that kind of sucks is they didn't properly do the billing stuff for my machine, so I can't go anywhere else until they have that sorted out. So that's fun.
You live the most fascinatingly mundane life.
I know, right? And as far as like gaming news goes, I finally beat Kingdom Hearts 2 again. So I'm debating whether or not I want to do the post-game stuff or just go into Birth by Sleep, which I haven't actually beaten Birth by Sleep yet, so that's going to be something I want to get started on before 3 comes out.
Just a few months away.
Yep.
Indeed.
Hopefully I can get the money for that, because I've been waiting over a decade.
My condolences.
And this farce, I've been too deep.
I'm like, well, it's supposed to be the end.
Well, the end of this saga.
It's the end until it isn't.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's the end of the Dark Seeker saga. We don't know what else Square has in store.
Well, yeah, it's like, I don't think the world could wait for a Kingdom Hearts 4.
Yeah.
Literally. Like,
Kingdom Hearts 4 around the heat death of the universe.
yeah.
And I think outside of that, everything else is fine. So I guess next person.
That'd be me. Let's see. Well, I mean, the major news is I'm still dealing with a cold. Like, I'm almost over it, but it's like things like the lingering cough are, well, lingering. Mm-hmm. And I'm definitely sick of the cough syrup haze.
Yeah. I can't have cough syrup because it makes me sick to my stomach, so have fun with that.
Well, it's like it doesn't make me... NyQuil doesn't make me sick, it makes me sleepy.
As intended?
Yeah, I'm like... That's why I slept 6 hours today when I didn't intend, during the day. Like,
I was about to say, if you only sleep 6 hours a day, buddy, you need help.
Like, no, it's like, I went to go take a nap at like 12 o'clock. Next thing I know, it's 6. This is not the first time that has ever happened when I've taken the wrong amount of NyQuil. Like, it's like NyQuil I'm very susceptible to. Like, let's see. Outside of that, nothing particularly major. Voted yesterday. I'm like, more on that in the post show. Let's see. We have in programming news, we have a special event planned for next week. More on that at the on Sunday's review shows, let's say. Like, because it's still a bit tentative. Like, the agreement's there, it's just we have to check on availability, and we still haven't gotten the codes. So, they might not come in by this weekend, like, but, outside of that, yeah, that's about it for the news. So, with that in mind, merrily we shall roll along to the interview portion of the broadcast as we are welcoming Mitchell Garriott and Jonathan Queller of Rosae x Ludis.
Hello.
Hi.
Right. So how are you two doing today?
We're doing very well. At least I am.
Yeah, doing pretty good. Doing pretty good.
Good to hear. Good to hear. Right. So how we like to start things off is to get to know the people behind the games and the studio and whatnot. And we start by asking what got you interested in video games, both on a personal and a professional level.
Okay, I suppose I'll go first. So for me, I grew up on a farm out in the middle of nowhere, Kansas. And the first time I saw a video game, the first time I saw a computer game at all was SimCity 2000. And it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. So I suppose that's how I got started. And it was just a way that you could sort of escape the life you were living and live a totally different one, try new things that you would never be able to do where you were at. And so I thought there was a lot of potential there, and I wanted to see what could be done with it. So every time new games came out, I was always pretty excited about it.
I played a lot of games with my friends. I didn't have a lot at home originally, but I always loved it because it was something that you could, it was a piece of media that you could really interact with. You could affect what was going on the screen. I always thought that was really cool. And I just sort of appreciated that more and more as time went on, how you could really interact with what mattered in a game, whereas opposed to just watching it unfold in other media. So that was something that I was always really excited about. And over time, I knew that I wanted to like make things, and games were just what I was interested in because there was sort of that dialogue between the player and the game itself. So yeah, I just followed that through, and here we are.
Oh, neat. And did you go to like university to learn how to develop games, or did you end up developing other skills and transferring it to games?
So when I started programming because my parents thought that it would be a good way to develop skills that could eventually become a career. Game development was just, I started making small, like arcade games. I started that from maybe the age of 7. When I ended up in high school, I started taking classes for it. And then when I went on to college, it was computer science. But most of what I did was actually contests where I just, did like programming contests through Skills USA or Scholastics.
I started playing around with making games in online communities, working on like fan projects for things from time to time, and just sort of on and off kept doing that. And I mentioned I always sort of knew that I wanted to do that. So when I went to college, I did look for a place that had some game. A game program, and fortunately I found one that would both allow me to interact with games and also study other things as sort of a nice foundation of how the world works around, the humanities, like history and things like that. So I did some work both in college on game development and on other academic subjects because I thought it would be cool to sort of have a background in both.
And at what time did you two meet and decide you wanted to develop games together?
Well, it was a couple of years ago. We met through a mutual friend of ours. We both lived in different states, but one of the friends just brought us online to play a game together and knew that we both did game development separately. And so he kind of introduced the two of us, and then we just worked on some different game jam projects over the years where we just worked on short, one-day projects even. And eventually, when he got out of college, he was looking for some opportunities. So I had a project I was just starting then, and I needed some extra hands to help me with it. So that's when I let him know, and he ended up moving down here.
Yeah, we actually, I believe it was a game of Terraria, and we actually started making up, like instantly just started making up our own way of playing, like thing we could do inside the game, where we sort of like built up, different fortresses, and it ended up being a chaos of lobbing bombs at each other, but it was a lot of fun. And we just hit it off and kept talking about like all the cool things that were involved in game design, and I believe we started right off the bat just sort of making something for fun, and then on and off over the next 2 years, or few years, excuse me, just making stuff, and then hanging out and just talking to each other, and just talking to each other again and again every time we had something cool come up.
And what other work have you done have you both done in the industry?
As far as me, I've done some stuff just working for different companies as contract work. Pretty boring stuff where I was just doing back end. And I've done some projects of my own through high school and college for different contests, but nothing that was a full release project of our own until this one that wasn't just, pretty mundane work.
I'm kind of similar. As we mentioned, I just recently got out of college, so I was mostly focusing on my studies, and that involved making a lot of games, because that's sort of how you learn more about making games, is doing it. So I did a lot of student projects and working with that, and then of course working with people online and sort of passion projects.
I've just done a lot of work in like app development, so a lot of the programming I was doing before this was just like software for different companies.
Not too shocking to hear. Like, it's not an uncommon refrain, especially for people who've just started their own companies. Anyway, so I should ask, exactly what does Rosae X Ludis stand for?
So what it means, well, actually, you can talk about it.
So Rosae X Ludis is actually sort of a play. I'm sure you guys have heard the term Deus Ex Machina.
Yes.
And of course that means in Latin a god from the machine. It of course refers to the trope where just sort of something happens to resolve the plot. Like in the original term, it would be like a god in like ancient Greek plays with a
god in a drama being literally lowered onto the stage with a pulley or something.
And we wanted to play with that a little bit, and so we sort of just changed the words a bit. It's so instead of a god out of the machine, it's roses out of games.
And like part of the idea with this is because we want to try to see if we can grow our ability to make games out of kind of nothing, because we don't have a whole lot of experience. We don't have a whole lot of knowledge right now. And we're also trying to, this is an ambitious thing to try to do, but everyone has to have a dream, right? So we're trying to kind of grow up games and make kind of like bring a little bit more art into them.
Right.
And yeah, that's kind of our goal. It's idealistic, but we want to create artistic games that are very expressive and then also grow ourselves through that experience.
Right. Sort of a growth of beauty out of the idea of a game.
That is interesting.
Our logo is a rose that is made up of the petals are spades and diamonds, and then the middle is a dice, like a die.
Yeah, I can see it.
Literally a rose made of games.
Well, right. Moving along. So you're working on your first game, and we have a trailer for it, Blood Nor Water. Is that queued up?
Give me 1 second to make sure everything's right.
All right.
Okay, yeah, we have the Kickstarter promo, so we'll start with that one.
All right.
Alright, I should be good to go now. So I will start this shindig.
All right. Blood Nor Water, a game about finding identity in a hopeless place. Blood Nor Water is a narratively driven strategy game focusing on a small band of soldiers trying to find their place in a war that is bigger than themselves. Not gonna lie, I am immediately reminded of the Valkyria Chronicles when I hear that.
That is a major inspiration of ours. We are pretty big fans of that game and the franchise.
I'm always happy when someone pulls that out of it.
No, that's good to hear. I mean, Valkyria Chronicles was a pretty amazing game. You know.
Yeah, personal favorite of mine.
Yeah. And indeed, this is a pretty lofty game for your first outing. You know,
right?
Because usually when indie devs are working on say their very first game, it's usually some retro style platformer or something along those lines. This is a tactical strategy game, kind of in what looks to be in the vein of Fire Emblem or Final Fantasy Tactics.
Yep.
So I suppose the first question is, why a strategy game for your first game?
So what actually happens is I work on a lot of short projects where the idea is to just make a game in a week or two, a short, simple project that's kind of fun and helps me practice. I was working at a big tech company at the time, so due to contractual obligations, I couldn't actually work on any game development. I can only do kind of personal hobby projects. So this just came about because it was a personal interest of mine. I love strategy. It's always been really close to my heart. So I put this little demo together because I thought it would be kind of a fun thing to work on. And when I was showing it to different people, there were a lot of people who thought that it had a lot of potential. I just did it because I wanted to, strategy games are hard to build. The reason why indies don't build them is because, pathfinding is tricky. There's a lot of really technical problems that are hard to solve. And so I wanted to see if I could tackle all of the problems first. So I just built this really solid little engine for a tactical strategy game that worked really well and had some fun ideas. And a lot of people were telling me that I had to make a bigger game out of it, that I had to finish it. So my thought was, well, if I've already solved all of the main problems, all of the roadblocks that could get in the way of actually releasing this game, the only real obstacle is just developing content. And that's something that's pretty safe. It's not as risky. So, maybe I should go ahead and try it. And so then I brought some other people in and got them involved, like Jonathan, and just sort of took off from there.
And what kind of tactical strategy game is this? Is it an SRPG? Is it a turn-based, real-time?
It's kind of hard to answer that. So I love StarCraft. StarCraft is one of my favorite strategy games, and the other one that I really love is Fire Emblem. And I kind of have a love-hate relationship with both of them. So StarCraft is awesome because of the real-time combat. It feels really fair. It has a pretty meticulous metagame and a high level of competitive play. The problem is it's not very accessible. It's really hard to get my friends into it. If they haven't already played it, it's really hard to get them started. And it can feel really overwhelming to a new player. Also, the strategy element is a lot of times less of a focus than just the actions per minute. It's about how fast can you click, memorizing certain patterns, and then playing technically very well. And while I respect that and I have a love for it, strategy isn't as much of a focus as I would like out of a game personally. Then you take something like Fire Emblem, and it does have player versus player. Like in Fire Emblem Fates, for example, there is the ability to play against other players, but there's a huge advantage to going first. Whoever hits first generally wins, because in the turn-based nature of the game, you're going to have just one more turn than the other person, and you're going to be able to hurt them before they have the chance to fight back.
Yeah, a lot of turn-based things have to somehow penalize the player that goes first to make them look like they're intended for player versus player, but that's hard to do in a strategy game.
Exactly. Like Hearthstone has some nice systems to handle that, but it's hard to do that for strategy. So what I ended up doing is Jonathan and I talked about this problem a lot to try to find a way to kind of handshake between those two different real-time strategy and turn-based. And what we ended up doing is we made a system where you can give orders to each of your units while time is frozen. And then when a turn starts, it plays out like StarCraft, where all units move at once and it has a window of real-time combat.
Right.
So there's some other games that have done kind of similar systems. I mean, Fallout comes to mind with the VATS. There's a few other games out there as well, but we wanted to create something that was kind of a hybrid between the two.
I want to say Battalion Wars on the N64 for a really odd one. I think it was on the N64. It might have been GameCube.
Battalion Wars was not really a strategy game, though. It's more of a third-person action game.
Yeah.
Wasn't it? It was a. I thought there was like a strategy thing, and then when you took your turn, it did that.
No.
I could be wrong. I don't have much personal experience. It reminded me of what I thought I'd heard. Sorry.
Yeah, it's like what they're describing does remind me of several CRPGs and how they handle their systems. Like the Knights of the Old Republic games had it where you could do a mix of turn-based and real-time. Like, or more recently, the Divinity Original Sin games have this. But those are a much different genre than what we're talking about here.
Right. There's a lot. There's a bit more of a direct focus on the on like one or two people, which we did want to have. We thought it was important to have a good story element, but there's also you're having slightly more than just like a small party. It's actually a group of people who you're arranging strategically. So I feel like it has a specific benefit for us in that for strategy, in that it really lets you pause and really think about what you're planning to do next, and sort of see your plans on the map at the moment, because you have the lines for where your characters are going and things like that. So it turned into an interesting solution. There was a lot of inspiration from a lot of those. It's space to pause the action and think, which was good. Although this is a bit more measured over time.
Right, and is this a strategy game built off of any sort of movement system? Tile-based, hex-based, or is it free movement?
Free movement, totally free movement.
Okay.
Yeah, that was one of the things we were actually thinking about a little bit, in that we sort of liked the thing about real time being that you weren't sort of restrained to a grid, that you could have sort of like a turn-based feel while also going a number of, to all sorts of different places.
The grid-based system works really well for games like Fire Emblem, because it gives you a way that you can look at the map and like quickly measure out how far your units can move, for example. But it also feels really restrained, kind of limiting in a lot of ways, I think.
Well, it's also, those kind of movement systems are best served for turn-based games, pure turn-based.
Right.
So it makes sense that this would be a full range of movement.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what kind of actions can you perform before a real-time turn?
So there are a few different ones. Each unit you can move to a different place on the map. If you move them onto a unit, they'll start attacking that unit when they get in range. They have some artificial intelligence so that they can kind of react to the context of the situation. But basically, you can either move a unit, or another option is that there's a card-based system. So these are commands, and these commands can change something about combat. So for example, one of them is you can throw caltrops on the ground, which if infantry units go over them, then they're going to take damage and get slowed on their movement. So you basically have the cards that you can play, as well as moving the units. And there are some units that can do special abilities, like, for example, clerics, which can heal the health of injured units.
Sounds pretty pretty in keeping with other strategy games.
Yeah, nothing too crazy there.
Yeah, we wanted to keep it straightforward. You don't want to change too much and make things confusing.
Right. And the cards, are those like actual like do you get those on the battlefield? Do you, how do you earn cards?
So some of them can be crafted, where you can just make them or buy them. They're basically representing things that are in the world, like some like caltrops is something you can just bring with you. They're basically orders that you're giving your troops to somehow change the battlefield. So some of them you can buy, some of them you can craft, some of them you can find in the world. You get them from story events, for example, or you can even just get them from developing the skills of a character and giving them a card that is basically a special ability or a special attack for that specific character. So there's a pretty wide range of ways that you can get these cards, and we want to use them to kind of flesh out the world and add more depth to the narrative design as well.
Right, because the point of the system is less to have a hand of cards that you draw randomly and then just play them out. What cards you have available is a reflection of what's going on the level, so that what options you have reflect what's going on and what's valuable to you, and also just the state of your character.
One thing to mention is that the cards that you draw are not just random. It's not like a trading card game where you draw a hand of cards and some of them might not be able to be used. Any card, like the game will not let you draw a card that you cannot use at that moment. And there's some context to which card it gives you. So generally, all of the cards are going to be good options. Some will just be better than others.
Okay. And like, how many cards can you draw in a given turn?
Right now, it's 5.
Okay. And in terms of units, are all of the units like unique characters? Are some like generic types? Is it a mix?
So the way it works right now is there are a large number of like signature characters with their own character art, names, stories, etc. But since there is permadeath in the story, those might run out if a game session is particularly harsh. So we do have the ability to have more generic versions be created to fill out your roster that don't have their own character art, for example. They're sort of procedurally created.
Right. And on the subject of permadeath, the question is, how much does that stick? Or what I'm trying to ask is, will the game autosave if a character dies or not? Because we've all played Fire Emblem. We've all had that, that character die, and you reset the progress, and so on and so forth.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the ones that doesn't let you, for example, is Banner Saga, where they don't really let you save scum, as it were. We want to let players have some freedom, so we're not going to be like trying to control or force them to play a certain way. You will be able to just restart a level. If a character dies and you restart the level, you get them back. We're not going to like force autosave and make sure that character is lost for good. You have some flexibility, but generally if a character dies and you save and complete and go on to the next level, they're not coming back.
Right. There is, of course, I think it's important to know that there will be a chance. You'll get second chances. So if a character goes down, you'll have a chance to save them. Also, because that makes a great story moment or a great player moment when a character goes down in the middle of nowhere and you're like, oh God, I gotta save them, and then you do, and that feels awesome. So there will be second chances to get them back within the level. And of course, you can, if you feel like that didn't go the way you wanted to, you can reset and try to make it go the way you wanted your story to go. I do want to point out, though, that it's also there's also an interesting point there is if a character dies, that does actually change the way that the game will go for you in some interesting ways. So, there's some interesting ways that could play out in the future. So you can also go down the other path and see where it's going.
Right. In terms of like jobs and classes and whatnot, what do you got here?
Right now, we're still working on getting the finer details of our job class system worked out. But I mean, you're going to have battle mages, you're going to have clerics who can heal allies. One of the more interesting things we have, which we did kind of draw from Fire Emblem, is there are flying mounted units, which can go over walls, over trees, or tall buildings. So there's going to be, if there's a particular class you love that's a staple of the genre, expect it to probably end up there.
Okay. And right, so I think we should talk about the narrative design since it seems to be a huge focus of this game. Um, and starting, what is the story of Blood Nor Water beyond uh, the market tag here?
Of course.
Yeah. So the story of Blood Nor Water is a story about conflict, of course. Yeah. So you have two characters. You have two siblings, and a civil war breaks out in their country, and one of them's named Ira. That's your main character, and the other, her sister, is named Leora. And Ira looks quite a bit up to Leora. So when the war breaks out, they end up separated, and Ira doesn't know what happened to Leora. So she goes and gets involved in the conflict in order to find out what happened to her and try to rejoin.
So a lot of the game is basically trying to reunite these two siblings, which are fighting on two different sides of the war. And it's basically the narrative is about trying to figure out if your side is right, or if, like, trying to sympathize with your sibling that's fighting on the other side of the war, and kind of like what that means for these two people who have been caught up in different sides of this conflict.
And reconciling the different points of view that come up when you find out that each person's on a different side.
Because they do have reasons for why they're fighting for the side that they're on, but at the same time, they're still siblings and are trying to find each other. So it's basically a question of, where your values lie and how that ties into your relationships with other people.
That is certainly a complicated take on things.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, we like to see the topic with a little bit of nuance, and
one of our biggest challenges is going to be to find a way to make this easily digestible and adequately conveyed through the game.
And how are you accomplishing that?
Well, it's an iterative process. We're still working on that. A lot more time has been put into the mechanics of the game so far, just because we want to make sure that we have a strong foundation to build off of. But at this point, we're looking at somewhere around a little bit more than a year for our release from this point. So what we're looking at is basically just polishing that, taking the story skeleton that we have and really streamlining it to make the best story that we can. Some things are probably going to change, but I think it's something that's feasible that we can accomplish as long as we put the proper time into it.
Indeed, because some of the how do I put this, other strategy games, I've seen this kind of thing, but it's more, you're fighting the bad guys and your siblings mind controlled or something like that.
Right.
It's a much more black and white take on things.
Right. And a lot of what I think is a good way to handle this is to less to give a message about what's right, and more just to say, here's the situation, and watch what happens.
Like, you don't want to make someone be explicitly the bad guys. You want to make sure they both have good points, but they both have human perspectives and are just basically trying to protect themselves.
Right.
Like, in the real world, there are fights that take place between people where neither one's trying to be the bad guy. They're both just trying to protect themselves. And maybe there's even a misunderstanding. And, that happens in war, too.
And, how long are you looking to make this story, roughly?
So it's not going to be a hugely long game. We're probably going to do something... it's a little bit up in the air because we leave this subject to change on making the best game possible. But I would imagine it's going to be maybe 15 different chapters. At the very highest end, it would be somewhere around 20. Each chapter would take maybe an hour to play through if you play through fairly quickly. So you're probably looking at somewhere around 20 hours of gameplay.
That's a pretty solid amount for strategy game.
And we are looking to make it where, if we get this released to a state that we like, we are looking to be able to build on it in the future. For right now, multiplayer is not our focus. We want to make a good game first. but we do have like multiplayer code working. So in the long term, if this game is, popular and accepted, then that would be the focus after the main release, would be releasing a player versus player multiplayer option.
Right. Anyway, so this game was recently subject to a Kickstarter campaign.
That's right.
Yeah. And, well, my first question is, what made you pick Kickstarter as a means of funding this project?
Okay, so I have a lot of friends who work in the games industry, just a lot of connections that I've made over the years. And generally, the rhetoric that I hear is that Kickstarter may not be the best way to raise money, but it is a great way to build a community. It's a good way to get your name out there. It's a good way to get some feedback from the people who are going to be your actual audience, and a good way to tell if an audience for your game actually exists. If you can make a Kickstarter and people start backing it, it shows that there's real interest and that the game is worth existing. So that's really why we did it, is because we wanted to make sure that there was an audience there, and we wanted to make sure that we were doing the right things to speak to the audience that we were going to be selling our game to ultimately.
And whether or not someone decides to actually put money towards something says a lot about how much they're actually committed or how much they're actually interested in an idea.
Which is a good thing for us, because we want to know if it's something that we can make that'll actually sell down the road.
Right. And so, for the record, this was a successful Kickstarter campaign. Not a high-grossing one. I believe it's a bit over 15,000.
Yeah.
Right.
After our PayPal backers, for sure.
Right. I'm just going by the Kickstarter numbers.
Of course. For that one, we actually got 14,663 on the Kickstarter page itself.
Right. And how much, was that funding adequate to help you complete the game, or did you need to search for additional funding?
So the funding is definitely adequate, because when we set out for this, we definitely wanted to make sure that we were very safe, that we could, not let our backers down and release a great product. So we got a lot of it done before the Kickstarter was even started. Most of that money is going to go to paying a composer. We have Mike Petrie for our music, as well as paying for additional art from our artist for the different characters. So it's definitely going to help. It's basically just to help finish everything off, polish it, and make the best game we can. So we'll definitely not have too many problems with funding. We are looking for a publisher right now and working with a couple of different publishers to find out who would be the best fit, but that's mainly going to be for distribution, so that we can get things like a physical release for Nintendo Switch.
Right. Like, granted, if you're just looking for a physical release, there are companies who just do that.
Right.
So, there are options out there, certainly. And indeed, this game is coming to the to computer platforms and the Nintendo Switch. And my question along those lines is, why the Nintendo Switch?
Okay, so the Nintendo Switch is really good for indie games. It's got a really great indie game community, and it's growing every day. And Nintendo has been really open towards indies lately. They've actually been building some pretty good relationships with some other people who I know in the industry. So that was a good sign. I own the console myself and love it, and have discovered a lot of great games on it. But also, it's got a touchscreen, and for a strategy game, that's really awesome, because controls on a console for strategy games have never really been the best. Mouse is way better. So if you actually have some tools like a touchscreen that you can use to make the experience better, that's something we definitely want to be able to take advantage of.
Right. And I'm presuming that you're aiming to have this work best in portable mode then, if you're going to take advantage of the touchscreen?
Yes, we're going to make it work as well as we can on console. We can't make any promises, because everybody's tried to make a strategy game work on console with controller, and very few people have made it work very well. But yes, the main focus is going to be to work in portable mode, but it'll still work with controllers too.
Okay. Outside of the touchscreen, are you planning on taking advantage of HD Rumble?
Absolutely. HD Rumble is pretty cool. We're a pretty big fan of it, and it's actually really easy to work with. because it basically just plays like sound files. So we already have been working with that.
Right. Is it going to be the same game on the Nintendo Switch in terms of like resolution and frame rate as it is on PC platforms?
No, just because there's, the Switch is a different console. You have different limitations. The resolution on Windows is adaptable, so like it actually works in 4K, and looks really awesome in 4K. And obviously, it's not going to work in 4K on the Switch.
No. Like that doesn't surprise me at all. So what are you targeting for the Nintendo Switch?
It's hard to say. We haven't gone through our whole optimization process. Right now with the hardware, it's working pretty well, but we still need to optimize further. So it's hard to say how it's going to end up in the final release. We're going to make it look as good as we can with as high of a frame rate as possible. I'd love to keep a 60 frames per second frame rate. I don't know if that'll be feasible at this point in time, but that's what I'm shooting for.
Okay. Like, is the Nintendo Switch version being developed in tandem with the PC versions, or is that going to come later?
It is going to come later. We want to make sure that we make the strongest game for PC first. We don't want to stretch our resources too thin and end up making a mediocre product on each platform. So we are still building it in mind where we will be able to port it to Switch, but our engine does support Nintendo Switch, and we've been making sure to stay within the hardware requirements. But PC is going to be our first focus game.
Okay. And in terms of PC, is this Windows only, or is Mac and Linux included in the equation?
We actually already have Mac and Linux working right now. Linux community has actually been awesome because we weren't originally planning on it, but we had a lot of people reach out to us and say that like having a game on Linux would be awesome because a lot of developers don't cater to them. So we didn't know if we'd be able to do it, but we actually got a demo working on Linux, and it actually works really well. So we're definitely going to release on Linux as well.
It's not surprising. I mean, we've had developers on here all the time say they'd like to do a Linux version, but it's just not viable for economic reasons.
Yeah, we're going to do it anyway because we believe in it. It won't take that much more work to do, and I think it would be nice for people who do only have Linux machines to still be able to play the game if they want.
Of course. Let's see. Any sort of price range you can mention at this point in time?
I don't want to make any promises, but we're going to generally try to keep it pretty fair. It's definitely not going to be any more than 30 unless a publisher forces our hand on that. But I think we're going to fight pretty hard to try to keep it under 30, and it may be like 20, but somewhere between 20 and 30, I would imagine.
I was going to say as a joke, somewhere between $3 and $99.
Yeah, I mean, that would be accurate.
That is true.
Right. Anyway, so I'm going to see if my colleagues have any more questions for you.
So here's the thing. You said you have a class change system, but you also have a lot of set characters. So is it going to be like a few characters that have set classes that are always going to be pretty much the same, and then a bunch of randos that can change their class freely? Or is it going to be a bunch of characters that each have one or a handful of classes that they can change into? Like,
this is subject to change, of course, because we want to have some freedom if we find out that a system will work better down the road. But I generally believe that you're going to have the ability to choose between a couple of different classes for each character. Each character will have a handful of different class options.
Okay. Just thought I'd ask because that's always a tricky thing to do, because if you have a bunch of, like, for example, in Final Fantasy Tactics, you will, unless you put effort into becoming emotionally attached to a lot of your characters, or are me, a lot of your characters are basically interchangeable because most of the characters can turn into whatever. Whereas
we
Fire
definitely
Emblem
want to put a focus
more
on making sure that each character has something unique about them that gives them a signature niche.
Right, and like Fire Emblem, usually most characters have like a group of a few classes at most,
right.
I think.
That's going to kind of be what we're modeling that system off of. Because we think that's cool. We want you to have an excuse. If you really love a character, we want you to have an excuse to use that character in your game.
That makes sense.
and to use them the way you want to.
Honestly, I think that probably makes more sense for most purposes.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's just because the Final Fantasy Tactics games are one of the major things that you think of. I was wondering if it was
Right.
going to be like that. So
Yeah, it's definitely something we put some thought into.
Yeah.
okay.
So how long are you trying to get the battles to be, like, the overall, like, maps, I guess?
We're kind of aiming at a soft, like, 1 hour for the maps. But the thing that we want to do is we want to. You guys are familiar with, like, the Metroidvania genres, how you can, like, find hidden items and, like, hidden areas in a level.
Very.
One thing, like, that's a lot of fun. It's really cool. I've been playing Hollow Knight lately, and I absolutely love it. We kind of want to do that, where there are kind of little secrets and stuff hidden in the levels, where you can rush through a level and beat it in a pretty, fast amount of time. But we also want it where if you really want to dig into the map and find stuff, you can find cards hidden in the levels, like different weapons for characters. Maybe you could even find a recruitable character that you can, like, add to your roster in one of the maps that you might totally miss by if you don't spend some time to look around. So we want
And
to
if you investigate the third bush from the left before turn 12, you could get a Master Seal early.
Yeah, pretty much. Stuff like that. So we want to make it kind of fun where it encourages you to explore a little bit and not just rush through. And I think there's a lot of fun things that can be done with that. So your actual playthrough time may be a little bit longer. It's kind of like side quests. You can play the game through, and if you just do the main quest, it's not that long. But if you actually play through the side quests and get the extra items, it's, going to give you more playtime out of it.
And, like, will you be able to save, like, in the middle of a map and come back to it later, or do you have to sit through it in one go?
No, we're definitely doing a bookmark system because
Yeah,
you don't want to force someone. Like, one of the nice things is it's nice to be able to, like, play a game and then you have something come up, so you put a stop on it, come back to it later. I feel like that's pretty important. There's not really any reason not to do that, so we're definitely including that as an option.
Because some games don't. That's why you have to ask.
Definitely.
Looking at you, StarCraft.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's it from me.
Galax already asked my question, so I'm good.
All right, then. All right. So it's wonderful having you both on the program. I know I'm looking forward to the game. We might have you on again, like when the game is close to release, because there's,
Of course.
We've covered a lot, but there's clearly a lot to still cover that's not in place yet.
Right.
So, anyway, until then, the game is Blood Nor Water. While the Kickstarter has ended, you can still pledge to the game via PayPal, via their website at roseludis.com/late pledges. And I'll put the link in the chat.
Already taken care of.
Okay. And somebody make sure that gets into the Discord as well.
It will be taken care of once we switch over to the topic.
All right. So look for it in 2019. Petty Finn, play us to the next segment. All right. Welcome to the topic of discussion, or rather topics this week, because we actually hit a case of writer's block, I guess, is like a better term. So we decided we're doing a couple of follow-ups this week. First up, we're going to give our impressions of the final Smash Direct. Especially since we did not cover that live because it was broadcast at 10 a.m. and nobody was willing to get up that early to stream. I mean, I know we do a show at Tuesdays at 11, but 11 o'clock is not 10 o'clock.
I mean, I was up to watch it, but it's all dependent on Petty Fan and stuff.
Yeah, it's like, Petty Fan is in Central, so that's 9 o'clock for him.
Yeah. Honestly,
Yeah.
there's a large portion in the middle of this that would have been extremely boring anyway. So
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
this was a very long Smash Direct, and it was very detailed, but it wasn't exciting. It was very nuts and bolts.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, the exciting things were at the very beginning and then like the very end.
Which isn't surprising because the game is about a month away now.
Right.
So this is like detailing all of the little detail, all of the little things that are important, but not necessarily going to elicit a lot of comments.
Yeah.
It's like the big things were we've got the full roster now. Like, turns out the Grinch leak wasn't real.
Thank God.
No, they got one thing right. Like one of the really, really obvious things.
Right.
That set of leaks was definitely composed of about 30% really obvious possibilities, and then about 70% things that fans really want to believe in.
Right. Ken as an Echo Fighter wasn't exactly the hardest prediction to make. I'm like pretty like that would a bigger surprise would have been them pulling out Chun-Li.
Yeah, I was about to say if Chun-Li came to play, oh my.
Yeah, I'm
Indeed.
I would have argued that would have been a much better choice, but they couldn't have done an Echo Fighter.
Well, and apparently Ken and Ryu are actually kind of different as opposed to normal Echo Fighters.
Well, yeah,
all of the Echo Fighters have some differences, and I mean, even in the Street Fighter games, Ken is more focused on Shoryuken, and Ryu is more focused on Hadoken.
Right. It's like, Ken is the, let's be honest, he's the original fucking Echo Fighter. He's been that, he's been that since his inception.
They literally said that.
Yeah. It's not inaccurate. Mind you, if they wanted to do the female Ryu, well, that would have been Sakura. And there was no way they were going to put Sakura or Dan or any of the other Ryu clones above Ken.
Right.
I think there would have been literal riots.
Uh-huh. So of the ones that they missed including Incineroar, obviously.
Yeah.
Which is weird because actually there was not a leak of any Pokemon, and they usually add a Pokemon. Yeah, and they added a Pokemon. They added WrestleCat. I'm like, I know that's not his actual name, but I prefer WrestleCat. Because he's a WrestleCat. Which is a pretty. I mean, there aren't really that many like full-on wrestling characters in Smash. There are characters who are good at throwing, but and they seem to have done some interesting things with its moveset. Though, I personally would have preferred to see like Decidueye because they only have like one Archer character, and it would give us a fully evolved Grass Pokemon. But it would be weirder to not have the literally a fighting game character Pokemon than to not have the Robin Hood Pokemon. Yeah,
I think the only reason why they don't have Machamp in there is because he's not really as popular.
And well, that's what Pokemon is for, also.
Yeah.
Incineroar, he's a pretty new Pokemon. He's
Generation 8.
They usually do a Pokemon from the latest generation.
Yeah. He's the final form of Litten, one of the Pokemon starters in Sun and Moon.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So
of the other things that were theoretically leaked, Shadow the Hedgehog and Isaac from Golden Sun both would have been real cool, but they'd been assist trophies before and are in fact assist trophies again, which was always more likely.
Right, and I'm like kind of disappointed with Isaac. I'm fucking happy that Shadow's overrated ass is still delegated to the assist trophies.
Though I don't think Tails is an assist trophy, and I hope he's coming because please.
There are 5 unannounced but locked-in characters now, so we'll see if that happens. That also could apply to Banjo-Kazooie because a lot of people wanted them, including like Microsoft.
Yeah, I'm like, and that would be a
We'll see.
very Microsoft thing to have its character come in via DLC. But yeah,
Indeed.
it's like
and I don't even know what Mock Rider is.
Mock Rider. I'll send you a link to the game.
I assume it's a racing game.
More of a driving game.
And yes, there's a difference.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, but
the chorus kids from Rhythm Heaven, sure, whatever. Sometimes they do Rhythm Heaven stuff.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I need to sneeze.
yeah. Anyway, yeah, it's like as far as we know that this is the final initial roster. Also, the first DLC character was revealed, and
this was at least partially Sakurai going, leak this, fuckers.
I was about to say, and Sakurai revealing he is still a master troll.
Yeah,
and yet
like,
Piranha Plant looks like a lot of fun to play.
It does.
Yeah, it's like.
And it should be noted that Piranha Plant isn't one of the 5 DLC fighters. He's extra.
Right,
No.
the 5 unannounced ones, there was a tweet the other day from Sakurai that they've been locked in and Nintendo did all the arrangements on deciding.
Right. So that will bring the final roster to 75 fighters.
Jesus.
Now,
Indeed.
when they said Ultimate, they
75
were
or 74. It depends on how you count Echo Fighters anyway, and also how you count Pokemon trainers, so...
Okay, Piranha Plant is officially number 7.
Right, gotcha. Yep, 75.
So
without
add
Echo
in, it's basic math here. So yeah, that is, that is an amazing amount of characters. Of course, people are still gonna whine because their favorite character didn't get in.
Why isn't Goku in Smash? I will fucking destroy you.
Okay, Goku, like he was
Smash
never
is
really in
supposed
the.
to be about video game characters who have made a mark on video games. I would rather see Master Chief than Goku.
Yeah, it's like if we start including things like Goku, then why not Captain Jack Sparrow?
Please no.
Why not the Trix Rabbit?
Let me destroy Nabbit.
Yeah. I know Goku has been in a number of games, but that's kind of my point. So is Mickey Mouse.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean he's being considered for Smash as well. Now, and indeed, that's probably another Goku being an anime, a manga character means there's a whole different host of licensing.
Oh yeah, that would be just insanity.
Not necessarily. I mean, because maybe Namco Bandai could represent, or they would just be one of the representatives. Japanese copyrights are complicated, even for copyright. Like, have you ever read the copyright notice on a anime video game? You're gonna notice a lot of names there because, like, each one of those entities owns a piece of this property.
I was gonna say your will and testament will probably be shorter than this.
Right. So it's not a surprise that Goku isn't a thing in Smash.
Yeah, Cosmos, who was the last theoretical leaked character, is a little bit less unlikely, but still not.
Right.
I mean, we already have Xenoblade actual characters in, and like they said, they couldn't get Rex in time because Xenoblade 2 wasn't announced yet when they locked in the roster. So he's actually kind of on the short list for 5 if they can come up with a way for him to play significantly differently from Shulk. There is one thing that they left possibly open. None of the 5 paid characters will be Echo Fighters. They didn't specifically say there would definitely not be any Echo Fighters included for free or with the other DLC. So that might be interesting to see.
Right, but moving along, the other big announcement was the story mode.
Well, first off, the Spirits mode was also kind of significant, or the Spirits, because a lot of people are disappointed that there's no trophies, but I understand that they are very work intensive.
Well, I mean, here's the thing: one is tied to the other. The spirits are part of
you
World of Light.
could do the spirits without doing story mode, but clearly story mode is all about the spirits thing. So
Right, because apparently what's happened in Smash now is the Nintendo apocalypse.
I was about to
Turns
say,
out-
everyone is dead except Kirby.
Yeah, except for Sakurai's special child.
hey,
Remember-
Kirby is quite possibly the most powerful Nintendo character.
He's possibly the most powerful character. Yeah.
Goku
Because
versus
remember,
Kirby, let's go.
Masahiro Sakurai created Kirby. He is also the creator of Smash Brothers. You do the
Yep.
math. It was
Indeed.
I was
But
like,
even beside that, the punching through planets is canon.
I know. I'm just saying. It was no surprise to me. Oh, look, Kirby's the one who survived. Oh, that's hi Sakurai.
Also, just including including Kirby in this game is way more work intensive than any other character, because every character they include, they have to model a new hat for Kirby and figure out how that character's neutral C works for Kirby to copy.
Well, more to the point now. So assist trophies also got an upgrade, as they are going to function as bosses as well.
Some of them, yeah.
Yeah.
Some of them. I
They
mean,
kind of had
the
that
assist
in.
trophies, a lot of the assist trophies that are more active can be attacked, and you can get a point for that. So if you summon them, might want to kill them before they get killed by someone else.
right. So-
but yeah, there are a few that might be bosses in some modes.
And along with, actually, the thing is, even though we now kind of know what World of the Adventure Mode is, we still don't really know, because
Yeah,
Nintendo-
we know the general setup, that it involves a lot of spirit battles, and then it starts with Kirby trying to get everybody back. But aside from that, there is some overworld with progression that you have to get to and hit switches, or get like a Lapras to go over the ocean or whatever.
Yeah.
There's a lot we still don't know about the specifics of it, and we don't know. They said that it's not going to be as story intensive as Subspace Emissary, which is not hard to believe, because Subspace Emissary was kind of really story intensive.
Right. Also worth noting it with the spirits, it's allowing another level of characters into the equation. By that I mean Shantae has finally reached Smash Brothers as a spirit.
Yeah, she's a spirit. She possesses Zero Suit Samus. I don't know exactly what, because when the spirits possess characters, they give them certain fighting styles. Like
Okay, I think that might have literally came out of somebody's slash fic.
Probably, yeah.
You know, it's like, I think I've read that one.
like, okay, aside from, but the idea is that the spirits, like when Crom is possessed by Owain, he taunts all the time because Owain is very showy.
Also on the DLC fighters, so it's not just the fighters. Each fighter will have a stage and some music.
Yeah, even more music for your Switch is now your gaming music player, because goddamn, there's a lot of music in this thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
And this is important because Nintendo is offering a season pass. They're calling it the Fighters Pass. It's $25. No, $5.
Basically $1 off each of the individual ones for a total of $5 off. So whatever. Sakurai, I appreciate that Sakurai didn't seem super enthusiastic about the idea of selling the Fighters Pass before anything was even announced, but
he also might have been so sleep deprived.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he actually said, "I wonder if I will ever get a break." That
Let
is a
the
thing
man
that-
sleep.
I'm like, well, he can sleep for a year from now, apparently.
Sleep the sleep of kings.
Yeah. Another reason to get the Fighters Pass is it will include an outfit for Rex, based on Rex, from Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 wasn't included here because this game the game's initial roster was locked in before Xenoblade Chronicles 2 got revealed.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
So yeah.
yeah, it's like it's kind of like why we don't have an ARMS character in here.
Well,
They're an assist trophy.
And because they're not stupid, they're not going to interrupt all of their plans to go back and add characters to their initial roster. And like they said, they aren't starting the DLC until the game is finished because, you know, some companies are still at least moderately responsible about that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's like it's also a game as big as, you know, for all of the whinging over the final Smash Direct, I think it gets forgotten just how much is in this fucking game.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in this game.
Yeah, when they're using that word ultimate, they're not fucking around.
It's not the Ubisoft Ultimate, it's the actual Ultimate.
Yeah, it's like, because I'm going to say it right now. This may be the final Smash game.
Uh-huh.
It's like there's definite tone of finality here. You know, it's like all the characters, all of the stages, all of the everything.
You can play it how you want.
Or at least Sakurai's last Smash game.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, that is what that word ultimate means. Final.
Mm-hmm. It's the peak, the pinnacle.
Yes.
Coming out next year, Smash Brothers Ultimate 2. No.
Which is kind of why the lack of the trophies is a little bit unfortunate. I understand why. They are a lot of work for fairly little, but it was nice to have, like, 3D models of characters that you otherwise don't get 3D models of.
Right.
But they are releasing a ton more amiibos for all the characters.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so switching tracks here, we're doing a follow-up on the PlayStation Classic because not too long ago, Sony revealed its list of 20 games. So let's do the rundown.
And boy, there sure are like 5 good ones in there.
All right, but let's do the rundown game by game. First up is Battle Arena Toshinden.
I played that once. It was kind of mediocre, and my mind kept confusing it with Soul Edge.
Okay, this is a complicated one because, in terms of PlayStation history, absolutely should be included. In terms of on its own merits, absolutely shouldn't.
Yeah, it's sort of important as a 3D fighter historically, but it's also not that great of a game.
Yeah, it's like Battle Arena Toshinden was the centerpiece of the PlayStation 1 launch. I remember I was there. I mean, even more than Tekken. Tekken was there at launch as well, and Tekken's represented. But Battle Arena Toshinden was the game that was promoted for the PlayStation back in 1995. So, yeah, absolutely should be here. Unfortunately, it was not a particularly good fighter back in the day, aged pretty terribly. It's not even really the best Toshinden game because it had sequels. Not shockingly, the sequels were better. On that note, next up is Cool Borders 2.
There definitely should be a snowboard game because there were a lot of those around that time in gaming history.
Well, yeah. Well, it's like this was Sony's snowboarding game.
Mm-hmm.
So, and yeah, this was regarded as one of the best ones. Couldn't really speak to it personally because I didn't play any of the Cool Borders games. But no disagreements with this one. Moving down, Destruction Derby. I'm a bit more ambivalent to this. First of all, it should have been Destruction Derby 2. The sequel was, in my estimation, better. I know there are some people who call the original better, but whatever. But more to the point,
the official stance of this show that they are wrong.
Anyway, Destruction Derby is a representative of Psygnosis, who was hugely important in the development of the PlayStation. But while I'm going down the list here, what I will tell you is what's not included is a Wipeout game. Presumably because they had like the Wipeout Omega collection on PlayStation
Was
4.
Wipeout the surfing or jet ski?
Wipeout is the futuristic racer.
Ah, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, it's like realistically, if you should have a representative of Psygnosis here, it should have been Wipeout. That was the defining franchise from that developer and publisher for the PlayStation. But Destruction Derby is a fine third or fourth pick. Going down, Final Fantasy VII. Of course.
Hey, that's definitely the biggest classic RPG for the PlayStation, and also probably one of the ones that's aged better than a lot of the other ones have.
Yeah.
Like Xenogears was great, except for they forgot to finish it, and also some of the sections are extremely clunky.
Yeah. Final Fantasy VII absolutely should be here, no question. Grand Theft Auto, bit more of it's like you can see why it's here because of how important the Grand Theft Auto franchise was to the PlayStation overall.
But this game doesn't even play like the ones that people actually know.
This, it's just because this is in the PlayStation 2 classic, they can't include GTA 3. Like that, it's like Grand Theft Auto here, the first one, I'm gonna say could have been left on the cutting room floor. It's like nobody would have missed this installment of the franchise.
Yeah, 1 and 2 were meh.
Yeah. Moving down, Intelligent Cube, good pick from the Hidden Gems pile. Like Intelligent Cube is one of the most unique and great unheralded PlayStation games. Glad to see it here. Same thing applies to Jumping Flash. Like
Naka would be pleased about Jumping Flash.
Jumping Flash is actually not very well remembered, but also it was a very significantly good early 3D platformer that actually came up with creative solutions for some of the reasons that early 3D platformers usually suck.
But once again, like a good smattering of hidden gems here. Going down the list, Metal Gear Solid, another no-brainer. Like it's one of the games when you think of the PlayStation, you think of. No arguments here. Mr. Driller. Now we're getting into the really pile.
Yeah, we sure do have the right to put that game in this mini console.
Yeah, I'm like Mr. Driller. First of all, it's a okay game. It's not even the best Mr. Driller. The problem is the best Mr. Driller game never came here. That's Mr. Driller's Drill Land for the GameCube. But I played the original Mr. Driller. It was all right. Not a game I especially associate with the PlayStation. I'm like, hit or miss.
Honestly, that just makes me think of Drill Dozer.
Yeah. I'm like, honestly, I think something else could have gone here. Oddworld's Abe's Odyssey. Yeah, I'll say this is a solid but not a spectacular pick. And it's not just because, we've talked to Oddworld inhabitants. We know them. Like, we like them. Oddworld is certainly a gem of the PlayStation. But once again, it's not necessarily a game you think of when you think PlayStation.
Well, and it's like the better way to play that is honestly new and tasty if you really want to play Oddworld.
True. I'm like, moving on, Rayman. Like I said, some of these are kind of like, I'm ambivalent for different reasons. Like Rayman as a quality game, sure. Rayman was a good game on any platform. It's just, once again, Rayman is not a character you really associate with PlayStation. It's not a character you associate with, really any platform. but I'd say if there was a platform, it'd be more Nintendo platforms.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
That being said, Rayman is an incredible, if really hard game. I don't think people know how hard the first one is. No. And once again, like, Rayman wasn't even built for the PlayStation. It was built for the Jaguar of all things, but did find success on the PlayStation. Moving on, Resident Evil Director's Cut.
Personally, I would put RE2 in there, but because remakes coming, yeah.
I'm like, that's a hard call to make. I'm like, because absolutely Resident Evil should be here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's like Resident Evil, for all of its success on a multitude of platforms, did get its start on the PlayStation.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, and the director's cut. Unfortunately, one of the problems here is, well, it's like, actually thinking about it, there was a director's cut of the director's cut. And let me explain by that, because there was a third.
Resident Evil's been remade a Brazilian times, so.
Well, here's what I mean. Resident Evil Director's Cut DualShock Edition.
Yep.
Yeah, there. Obviously.
Well, there's a reason why they couldn't use that one.
Yeah. I mean, as far as Resident Evil picks, this is good enough.
Yeah.
Like, for the best quality, you probably should have gone with Resident Evil 2.
Yeah.
But, no, this is fine. Let's see. Revelations Persona. This is another one. This is another retro.
Yeah, that's another really, really clunky first entry in a series that became very popular, because this was before they thought you could actually market a game with the title Shin Megami Tensei. So there's a lot of stuff that in the original release was localized very weirdly.
Yeah, I think.
I don't know if they'll be doing the exact same dub release or if it'll be closer to the original, but we'll see.
I think it's going to be a re-release of the original version. Yeah, for the record, you should get the PSP version of this game.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
You know, it's like, but having it included here isn't the worst thing. I'm like, especially since, I'm going to say one of the structural problems is there's not enough fucking JRPGs here. But we'll get to that.
Especially since the PlayStation was like the console for JRPGs, since the Nintendo 64 just could not into.
Right. We'll get to that when we get to that. But let's see. We've got Ridge Racer Type 4. Once again, this would have been a no-brainer had they included analog control.
Yes.
Without it, you're just like, this game was really designed for analog control. I said previously, Namco released a special controller with an extra big analog control thing, the NEGCON, if I'm remembering correctly.
So you can play it without analog controls. It's just terrible.
And not necessarily terrible, but you know, it's a 3D racer.
Smoother experience.
Yeah, it's like, you do the math. Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo.
Man, the sprites from that are all over the place in Capcom stuff.
Yeah, good pick. Once again, not necessarily something I'd associate with the PlayStation. Siphon Filter. Yeah, it's like, I think this is just among the forgotten. Like, I remember playing the original Siphon Filter. It was all right.
I remember that name, but nothing about the game.
It was kind of their answer to GoldenEye, although third person. It was all right. Though, once again, I'm trying to remember if that had analog control or if it was the sequels.
I think it was the sequels.
Yeah. Moving on, Tekken 3. Probably the last, well, actually, it's the second to last no-brainer pick here. At Tekken 3, probably the fighter you think of when you think of the PlayStation. Moving on. And now we just got the what the fuck pile. Because the next one is Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six.
Again,
so-
without analog
There have
controls.
been an awful lot of Tom Clancy games. I'm guessing this is not one of the good ones.
No,
It's
no,
not.
here's the thing. It's not even a good version of the game. This is a tactical PC shooter, and I mean really heavy on the tactics, to the point where playing it on the consoles, really, you couldn't really replicate the experience of what Rainbow Six was in 1997 on a fucking console, and the PlayStation really couldn't fucking do it. Oh, like this just should not be fucking here just on quality alone, let alone on PlayStation. Yeah, Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six never really strongly associated with the PlayStation. Obviously, it's appeared a bunch, but Twisted Metal. Once again, I think they should have gone with Twisted Metal 2, but not a bad representation for the PlayStation. Certainly one of their most popular franchises of the age. And finally, Wild Arms. Good second tier pick from Sony's library. And those are the 20 games. I'm going to say it right now. Nintendo is much better at picking these things out than Sony is. Like, I still think the best lineup I've seen out of the mini console is the Super NES Classic, because that was all killer, no filler.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
It was stone cold classic after stone cold classic, and nothing that I went, why is that there? I mean, in fact, the thing was, there were a few admissions from that. Here, there are some glaring holes. Okay, like, where the fuck is Tomb Raider?
Yeah, I would not be shocked if next year or in like 6 months to a year they're releasing another one with DualShock.
Yeah. Well, it's like, even with DualShock, where the fuck is Tomb Raider? Like, Tomb Raider was one of those games, one of those franchises that defined the original PlayStation. And once again, I know Tomb Raider has had a extensive history elsewhere, but it was something that was really closely associated with the PlayStation back in the PS1 days.
And the first two Tomb Raider games are still fairly, I mean, they're clunky comparatively, but they're still fairly well regarded.
Well, it's also Sony actually got the exclusive rights to Tomb Raider games on consoles for a period of time.
I think it was up to Angel of Darkness.
Actually, it was Tomb Raider 4. So that kind of shows that's how important Tomb Raider was to the PlayStation brand. And it's not here. It's like another one, Driver. Like, Driver was one of the best-selling titles. Like, really the kind of, it was Grand Theft Auto 3 before Grand Theft Auto 3 was Grand Theft Auto 3.
Also missing is Spyro and Crash, which that one they were already remade, so I can kind of see why they were omitted, but it still kind of sucks.
It just doesn't feel right.
And because they didn't have the dual analog, they couldn't include one of the greatest, probably the greatest platformer on the PlayStation, Ape Escape.
Oh yes.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's Ape Escape is literally.
And if they were looking for
the DualShocks are a little bit more general purpose, but Ape Escape is literally very nearly DS touchscreen tech demo level of yes, this is a game about the DualShocks.
And the thing with Ape Escape, it's not been re-released anywhere. You can't get it on PSN. I guess the closest was the remake on PSP, and that was god awful.
Yeah, and if they were looking for a first-person shooter representative, instead of Tom Clancy's,
only have one analog stick.
Indeed.
Can I finish?
Yes.
Instead of having a PlayStation Rainbow Six game, one of the Medal of Honor games, Medal of Honor or Medal of Honor Underground. That was the game series that showed FPS games could be done on a PlayStation. Now, it's like there's a whole bunch of first-party games missing here, like maybe Legend of Dragoon,
Medieval.
Like, if you were going to get some Capcom representation, I think you could have done better than Puzzle Fighter. You could have gotten one of the various Street Fighter 2 iterations.
Yeah, wasn't the Alpha 2 or whatever?
you'd probably want Street Fighter Alpha 2 or something like that, because once you got into the versus games and such, the PlayStation kind of dropped the ball.
That might be the understatement of the night.
Yeah. The point is, not a terrible list on balance. Just some, very glaring omissions. And some of the representatives here are not necessarily, you think PlayStation, like seriously, why is like Mr. Driller? That just feels like you plucked that to fill a spot.
I didn't even know Mr. Driller existed on the PlayStation.
I did.
Same here.
I think I played it on the Dreamcast.
That's more where I was getting at. I remember it from Dreamcast, not PlayStation.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the question is this worth $100?
Ooh, like just buying each of those games individually, yeah, but there's not all those games we want.
Yeah, I'm gonna say yes, but barely. Like, I think there's enough good stuff here, like, to warrant that, but I couldn't. It's not like with the Nintendo things where I could say, sure, this is about the best, possible representation you could get.
Well, and one of the things that really depends for me is how they handle Final Fantasy VII. Will it be one seamless experience, or will you have to basically get up, hit the eject button or whatever to keep swapping discs?
Oh, that is going to be interesting. Anyway, so that'll about do it for this installment of Fragments of Silicon. Coming up the week ahead, let's see, nothing scheduled for Friday. Sunday reviews, we've got Party Hard 2. That's my game. 60 Parsecs. Petty Fan will be handling that, and everybody will be covering Steampunk Graveyard. Until then, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell so you get notified when we go on air. And until Sunday, I wish you good gaming.